Hi there, it's Kanika. This is an episode from the That's Total Mom Sense archives, which date back to 2019. If you're new here, there's a chance you haven't heard this one yet. And if you've been tuning in since the beginning, you'll surely be able to gather new ideas this time around. I know I have. I hope you enjoy it. On to the show. Hi, I'm Kanika, and you're listening to That's Total Mom Sense, the podcast, where I interview public figures on their life lessons in parenting, legacy, and built-in sixth sense.
Hey, what's up? I'm Kelly Rowland, and you're checking out That's Total Mom Sense.
Hi, this is Chelsea Clinton, and my experience on That's Total Mom Sense was fantastic.
It's me, Bobby Brown. Can't wait to share my story.
Thank you to my guests, brand partners, community, and you for making this show possible. Episodes released every Thursday wherever you listen to podcasts. You can join my tribe by logging on to thatstotalmomsense.com and by following me on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram at Kanika Chadda Gupta. Now let's dive into today's episode. Allergies are becoming more and more frequent in our Western world. 1 in 20 people will develop a food allergy, and 1 in 100 will have a life-threatening allergic reaction. Decreased exposure of infections or microbes could be a cause, and another is delayed introduction of allergenic foods such as eggs and nuts until later in childhood can have an impact. Today, I am so excited to have Meenal Lele on my show. She's the founder of Lil Mixins. Reading from an excerpt from her feature in La Fleur, when Meenal Lele's oldest son developed food allergies, she did what any good chemical engineer would do. She dove into the data. Within the same month, a landmark study found that many allergies can be prevented by introducing allergenic foods into a baby's diet during a critical window of time in their first year. For Lele's first child, it was too late. But when she had her second, she was determined not to repeat the same mistake, only to realize how complicated the food introduction process can be. That's when she got the idea for Lil Mixins, powdered foods that can be easily stirred into baby food in the correct amounts. And on today's show, she's going to talk about how she found her niche between science and business, how she started Lil Mixins, and what parents need to know about allergies and preventative measures they can take for their kids. Meenal, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. So let's start from the beginning. I'd love to hear about your life and how you kind of tread on this career path. So tell us about your childhood.
I grew up in New Jersey. I have an older sister and 2 parents that are kind of both in the science field. My dad was an electrical engineer and my mom was a chemist. And growing up in New Jersey, actually, one of the biggest industries, I guess, is the pharmaceutical industry. And I grew up right near where J&J is headquartered. And I kind of always thought I would want to work in the pharmaceutical industry just because I think if you're going to do something, the idea of improving people's lives, making them healthier and safer sounds like a great way to spend your time.
Absolutely. And so they inspired you to become a chemical engineer yourself?
Yeah. I really like the whole idea of engineering. You know, I always say engineering is really a mindset. In the engineering school, obviously, you have to specialize in one area in chemistry or chemical engineering or material science or civil or something like that. But in truth, most of the classes are a variation on central themes about how do you break down problems, try and understand specific ways in which the problem could occur, you know, parts of the system that can be addressed and changed, and then arrive at something different. So and it's just applying that same thinking kind of to a structural problem, a biological problem, a chemical problem.
Absolutely. So you're a problem solver at the core. And, you know, that comes in handy when you become a parent. So
it's become helpful.
Yeah, exactly. So tell us about, your mom life and your family.
So I have 2 little boys. They are both, I guess, what we still consider toddler, although I don't really know when toddlerhood ends. My older one is 5. He just started kindergarten. And I still kind of consider him a toddler. He doesn't really seem like a kid to me yet. But although, you know, the way he talks now, sometimes we're always so astonished at kind of the information he has in his head. And so I think, probably everyone has the same experience. Is motherhood is really just a long, long balancing act. And or as my husband likes to say, it's just one long optimization problem. Trying to figure out how your schedules are going to work, how are we going to be home for dinner, who's going to deal with this, and when one of the kids suddenly hates you this week and loves the other parent, who's going to get them in bed and things like that.
That's so true. And I feel like we have one, if you want to say CEO, project manager, whatever role or title you want to give it, that kind of has to lead, and be able to kind of know what's going on when and provide structure to the household, right?
Absolutely.
So is that you?
I think in some ways, there's this, did you ever read Eat, Pray, Love, that book by Elizabeth Gilbert?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Okay. There's this one random scene that she talks about her parents and how they negotiated their marriage. And she talks about this like weird truce they got to in their gardening, where her mom had the first 3 tomato plants, and then her father had the last 2 tomato plants, and then the cucumber plant or something like that. And she says, this setup doesn't really make any sense, but it's sort of what they negotiated and worked out for them. And I feel often that with parenting, it can be really similar, that I, for some reason, am in charge of, making sure that they are in the right size clothes, but my husband seems to always be in charge of making sure in the right size socks. And, these weird little truces we've come to make sure that everything is being taken care of. And I'm not sure how we got to this, but it seems to be working right now.
Yeah, that's great. And if you could tell us about the story about your older son, and what that experience was like when you discovered that he had a food allergy.
Absolutely. With parenting, when you're pregnant and everything, it's a long series of things that you sort of, or fears maybe, that you work yourself up to, and then the risk is always low and then they go away. So maybe, when you're pregnant, you're really scared for a while that the child will have some sort of, genetic disease or Down syndrome or something that, will change the way you think about being a parent. And everyone tells you these fears are overblown. And then you come out on the other side and they were totally, nothing happened, or your kid's born perfectly healthy, and you sort of forget about it. And food allergies were sort of like that for me. And I was thinking about them because I'd heard, all these things about children having to sit at separate tables and kids getting hurt and things being banned in planes and things like that. And so, of course, this fear starts building in me, because what is motherhood if not just a long series of fears? That, my kid's going to have a food allergy. And I remember, just like with all the other things, everyone's saying, well, no one in your family has food allergies, and your parents are immigrants. And, why do you think, your kid's perfectly healthy? Why do you think they're going to develop a food allergy? Stop panicking about this random thing. Right. And so I wasn't really panicked about it, actually. You're always doing that balance of worrying and not worrying. And then kind of around the 6 to 9 month time frame, I remember we went to visit my sister in London. And that was the first time someone said to me, hey, his skin's kind of dry. And we came back from that flight. It's probably just a coincidence that the timing worked out that way. But in my head, it was now looking back, I'm convinced that it was something about, how dry the plane was, and it dried out his skin. And then he ended up, being diagnosed with maybe some early signs of eczema. And it just was like this, one after the other, with the eczema. And then we're starting testing for food allergies. And then he ends up reacting to a scrambled egg. And then next thing you know, he's reacting to peanuts, and you're in and out of the hospital. And before you know it, he's developed asthma. And it was just like this long chain of things that this one fear turned out to be real.
Yeah. Wow. And so then you met with your pediatrician, and, she he gave you the lowdown on what was going on?
What's funny is actually, no, that's not what happened at all. Right now, there's so much new information coming out, and there's a bit of confusion. And of course, no pediatrician wants to guide you towards something until the data is pretty settled, right? They're not in the business of chasing shiny objects. And so what was really upsetting to me, actually, is that they kind of all were like, this happens. But in my head, I'm thinking, wait, you're just kind of shrugging that, they're like, yeah, it happens. And no
Oh
one
my
could tell
gosh.
me why it was happening or, why him? What did we do wrong? And how could this have happened? And what should we do? What should we be doing now? And they're kind of like, it happens and we're just going to kind of take it a couple months at a time and see what we need to do. And that to me, again, when somebody throws their hands up and just says like, I don't know, we'll see what happens. Like that offends my, my mindset really deeply because you always need a plan, right?
Right.
And so that was not acceptable, an acceptable answer. So I went in, I started just reading more science and literature. I said, well, somebody's got to know something. And I started looking into it more and trying to understand, what could have gone wrong or how did he develop these issues? And part of it was I was already, by the time he started developing these issues, I was pregnant with his younger brother because they're only 19 months apart. So I wanted to, not let this happen again, right? And that's really where I started to understand or started to learn that there was all this new science emerging. And in fact, this science has a long history. So the LEAP study, the one that kind of definitively showed, if you will, that peanut allergies are somewhat preventable, that at least a large percentage of them can be prevented by eating peanuts regularly from when you start solid foods out through a year. You have to eat a couple grams of the protein every sitting. You have to do it 2 to 3 times a week. And if you do that, you can cut your risk of this peanut allergy specifically by, let's call it, 60 to 80%. The study was 80% on high-risk children. That study came out in 2015, but of course, it's not that one doctor woke up one day and had this random idea and decided to test it on 500 patients in the course of a month. Obviously, the study itself took a couple of years to do. And where did he get this idea? Well, that research actually goes all the way back to 2008. And that was the research they did showing in the UK, where they looked at children who were culturally or genetically Jewish and comparing. They knew that the food allergy rates were much higher in the UK to the peanut allergy rates, in Israel. And so they said they were trying to uncover what was the difference. And that was actually where they found that Jewish children in the UK were not eating peanuts when they were little, whereas Jewish children in Israel were eating peanuts from right when they started their first foods. And that was one stark difference. How they ate was a stark difference between the two populations, who, again, were genetically very similar. Because up until then, a lot of people thought this was some sort of genetic issue. We knew that answer back in 2008, and which was years before I even thought about having kids, And so to me, I was really frustrated that even though there was this 7 years of information out there, nobody had brought it to my attention that it was such an easy intervention I could have done.
Right, absolutely. And so that's what led you to kind of solving that problem for your second kid, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And because once I knew, okay, all I have to do is feed him these foods. That sounds easy enough. And then part of the challenge was I have this toddler in the house who is, can't touch any of these foods. And I'm nervous about getting eggs and almonds and whatever else on the spoons and the cookware and things like that. Because when they're little, their allergies are also, I think throughout life, actually, your allergies can kind of flux, right? So everyone asks like, well, how bad are your kids' allergies? And I always say, that's something no one tests. I don't really know because I'm not insane enough to try various levels of the allergen and see what lands them in the hospital. No one's going to do that.
Yeah.
So we're nervous because we don't know. And as I said, he's only 18 months old. So, we have to make sure he's not going down the stairs or doing whatever. So you're out of time. You are worried about touching everything. And yet you're trying to bring all these foods into the house now to feed his younger brother. And I just realized between my husband and I both working full time, feeding a baby 3 times a week, something, a pre-baked egg or properly prepared nuts and things like that was just an insane ask. And then no one was going to do it. I was terrified, and even I quit or didn't do it nearly as frequently as I should have, even after I didn't stick to the 3 times a week. Maybe it was like 1 to 2 times a week pretty quickly because it just got to be so overwhelming. And I quickly realized, the overwhelming problem, the part that it's overwhelming is something that can be easily solved.
Yes. And so that's how Lil Mixins was born?
It was born, and again, kind of the story is after I learned this information, I was one of the first of my friends to have children. And so I started telling my girlfriends, as moms share all this, advice with each other. I started telling my girlfriends, hey, this is the new research. Your doctor might not talk to you about it yet, but happy to send it to you, and this is what you need to do. And everyone just sort of looked at me and said, I'm not going to do that. That's far too much work. And the one person who was like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. She assigned it to her nanny to do.
Yeah, it just, it's unfortunate that parents don't want to take as much of an interest until it becomes an issue in your home.
So I think actually parents are not nearly worried enough because they still think the risk is really tied up in your family history. We are one example, but I believe the statistic is 2 out of 3 children who are developing food allergies have no family history of the issue.
My goodness. Yeah. And it's become so prevalent. Can you speak to that? Because, now, we see foods that are marked, dairy free or nut free. And even in their schools, there's nut free schools. I mean, my twins are in a, Montessori daycare where it's not allowed as it should be because of to prevent any issue happening with the kids that do have allergies. So why is it on the rise in the first place?
Well, before I answer that question, I want to just tell you something funny about that, which is I am not a proponent of nut-free zones and things like that. First of all, they've been proven to not actually have an effect and keep people safe. But 2 is that it gives too much weight to nut allergies. Dairy allergies can be just as deadly, and egg allergies can be just as, terrible and deadly. And yet we don't have dairy-free schools or egg-free schools. And I don't think we should. I think that it's a terrible decision to have the entire world's population not eating any of these proteins. I'm saying that as a parent whose child is put at risk by having these things. I think you always have to balance the good, what's better for individuals against what's better for everybody. And but that's a bit of an aside. And it's just one of those things that annoys me, I suppose, on some level, because I think everyone's really, really worried about peanut allergies. One of our products is around, is a baked egg around egg allergies. And I wish people were far more concerned about egg allergies than they are. They're more prevalent than peanut allergies, and they're so much worse to deal with. And dairy allergies like that. Like I would take a peanut allergy any day over a soy allergy, for example. So it's absolutely everything.
Yeah.
My kid does not have that, but for a brief moment, we thought he did. One of the tests came up positive, and I just threw my hands up in defeat, because once you have a soy allergy, you almost can't eat anything that you did not make yourself.
I want to cover what the most common food allergens are. And in a Kids Health article, it says that a child could be allergic to any food, but these are the 8 most common and account for 90% of all the reactions in kids. And that's milk, eggs, peanuts, soy, wheat, tree nuts, which are, like walnuts and cashews, fish, and shellfish, which includes shrimp. So those are the most common 8. And you've formulated powders that incorporates like all of these that you can, slowly introduce to your child?
So actually right now our products cover peanuts, eggs, and tree nuts.
Okay.
And the reason we don't do some of the others is dairy is one that you can introduce to your kids early, but yogurt works. And I'm a big believer that people are always trying to sell parents things they don't need. And that would be a good example of one. You don't need a new product, whereas there's not really a good way to feed your child a baked egg, for example, when they're 4 to 8 months old, but yogurt works at almost any age. So use yogurt. And for wheat, for example, is a lot of the baby cereals are really just ground up wheat, right? So you can use that as well.
Okay.
We currently haven't gotten into some of the other big ones, as you mentioned, soy, sesame is about to be added to that list.
Okay.
Fish, shellfish. And some of that is just where we are as a company. And so really understanding what are parents looking for. One big thing to think about I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you, is that there's definitely a correlation between the food allergies that develop and what people are eating in their house. So, for example, if you do not eat fish and shellfish in your house, you're vegetarian, and well, I guess some people, vegetarians, eat fish, but if you didn't, your child is a very low risk of developing a fish allergy to fish, because most people think, this is a common misconception, everyone builds up all this thing to the first day, that the first time they're going to feed their baby an egg, or first time they're going to feed their baby peanut. But if you are eating eggs and peanuts in your house, your baby has already been exposed to eggs and peanuts.
So your take, why do you think allergies are on the rise now in children?
Well, there's a lot of different theories, but the only one that to me right now seems to be making sense, and to be clear, this is conjecture still, because we're trying to uncover the direct link. There's definitely correlations that you can see between the changes in people's microbiomes. That's the what's called commensal or friendly bacteria that live in your intestinal tract and your stomach and on your skin and all parts of you, that they're friendly, they help us. So we've seen, when they look at it, there's been a big shift in what kinds of bacteria, the specific strains that exist in children today versus 50 years ago, even 25 years ago. And when you look at babies who develop food allergies, for example, versus babies who don't, babies who have other issues and babies that don't, you can see differences in their microbiomes. Now, they have not gotten to the point where saying, it's bacteria XYZ that is missing from or in, present in babies with food allergies, and we just have to get rid of that particular bacteria, or we just have to add that bacteria. We are not at that point yet, but that is the piece that makes the most sense, because that microbiome or that series of bacteria does a lot of work in digesting your food, in lining your intestinal tract correctly with basically like a mucus that keeps food proteins from leaking out. And we're finding more and more that it actually joins up with your immune system, if you will. It's part of your immune system on some level that is deciding what is and isn't a threat. So something there went awry, but we don't today know what exactly it is.
Okay. And so the formulas that you came up with, how do they work, and how should parents use them?
Yeah, so they're just powders of 100% food. So what we've done is take the food as cleanly as you would like to have them, and powdered them so that they're very dehydrated, meaning that they adhere to water well. So any baby food, all baby food is very mushy and watery. Any baby food you put it into, it'll just sort of disappear into that baby food without adding volume. And then you just feed it to your kid. So if you're making purees at home, or you're buying purees in jars or pouches, you can add in one serving to it and feed it to your baby. And each of the jars, for example, we actually now have it in 2 form factors, in jars and in these, individual serving stick packs.
Oh, cute.
If you either one, basically, if you use two scoops, from the jar, that's 1 serving size. Each of our servings are designed to match what has been studied in big clinical studies and shown to work. So which has always been 2 grams of the protein is what's been studied. So each of our products, when you take a serving, you're getting 2 grams of the protein in your food.
Wow, that's amazing. And so you have peanut and egg powders that you can essentially introduce at the 6-month mark when they're eating solids?
Yep. And every baby's a bit different. Some are ready for solids closer to 4 months. Almost everyone's ready for solids by 6 months. Changes baby to baby. So whenever they're ready for solids, these proteins can be right in there with their first foods.
Wow. And then eventually, if you want to go into the, the toddler-led weaning, where they're eating, small cut up food, then you just introduce the actual egg or whatever it is. Okay.
Exactly. Wow. When they get older, you really do want to move them on to peanut butter or scrambled eggs or things that are developmentally appropriate. This is really to help parents in that window where they're not ready to be pincering food or eating chunks, but you do want to get this into their diet, because that's the critical window where their immune system is starting to decide what is and isn't a threat.
Exactly. Okay. And what about if we were to take it back to when you have the baby in utero? Should you be eating eggs and dairy and nuts so that kind of, is that a way to like introduce it into your gut bacteria that the kid also gets some portion of that when they're developing?
No, actually, that what you eat during your pregnancy has no effect on anything, as far as anyone can tell right now. And
Okay.
if you think about it, though, is because when your baby is in utero, their umbilical cord is connected to you, right? But they're getting basically a blood-to-blood connection, and so they're not really eating. They don't eat anything. They basically directly take nutrients from they're sharing your bloodstream, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you eat like cauliflower, you don't have bits of cauliflower floating around in your blood.
Yes, that's true. Okay. So what do you think parents need to become more informed about?
I think parents need to be aware about this rise in food allergies and understand that the things that first of all, food allergies are very related to eczema and asthma. They're all this triad of allergic disease, and along with rhinitis or hay fever, or seasonal allergies kind of thing. These are all very related, and that you are trying to deal with all of them at the same time using different mechanisms. So that means, when your baby's little, taking care of their skin, trying to make sure that that they're not developing eczema, that you want to be getting these foods into their diet early and regularly. So you're training their body, these are safe foods. You also want to make sure that, you're passing on a healthy gut biome to your baby. When the baby is born, they actually take their first microbiome. They take it from their mothers, from breastfeeding, from the skin to skin contact, and actually swallowing, the vaginal fluids from going through the birth canal. So that's really where they get that microbiome. So you want yours, moms, to be as strong as possible. And then all the foods you feed your baby, right? So a lot of baby food out there today, if you look at it, it's really high in sugar. And it's because they want babies to slurp down these packs. And sure, it's pears, but at the end of the day, it's a lot of sugar. And we all know this has been proven artificial sugars, but high levels of sugar are basically toxic to a healthy gut. And so you really don't want to be overfeeding your children sugary foods. And a lot of foods we think of as healthy are actually super sugary foods.
So one thing I like to do on That's Total Mom Sense is give my listeners some tangible takeaways by the experts that I'm interviewing. And so in your opinion, for a first-time parent, what should they do? What plan of action can they make to address, potential allergies head on?
We came up with I guess they're called drip campaigns that you can sign up for on the website, lilmixins.com. And it month by month, it sends you basically a 15-step plan starting from when you're pregnant all the way out to when your child is about 9 months old, with the different things you can be doing at each point in your child's life that are most important to reduce their risk of food allergy, eczema, asthma, all the things.
You're literally kind of following them on the timeline of, just gave birth onwards?
It actually starts all the way back, just like you asked the question about, does what I eat when I'm pregnant matter? It actually starts, from when you're about 26 weeks pregnant, because there's little steps you can be taking even all the way back then, and making choices you make about what medicines you take during your pregnancy, things like that. So we try and we want to have information for that entire life cycle, because it changes that whole time. Things you might be worried about 30 weeks pregnant are totally different than what you're worried about when they're 3 months old.
Exactly. Absolutely. And then you talk about how they can introduce the foods at the 6-month mark and, 9 months and 12 months, basically those milestones, right?
Exactly. There's, the right recipes you can be using, right form factors for food to take, all the different information you need to make sure your kid is taking all the right steps towards reducing their risk of allergic disease.
That is wonderful. And that site again is Lil Mixins, LILMIXINS.com. That's great. I think it's important for all parents to follow along and get these, articles or to-dos or push notifications because, like you mentioned, your pediatrician doesn't have time or may not actually incite that much interest in you doing the work to figure it out. Right?
Absolutely.
One other fun segment that I have on the show is the mom sense moment. I love asking my guests this question. We all have a mom sense, our own intuitive sixth sense when it comes to our kids. And is there a moment in time that you're like, you know what, I just trusted my mom sense?
You sort of almost stereotype your child. I think it's so easy as parents to sort of come up with a persona. Oh, he's shy, or oh, he's whatever. And with one of our sons, we were really nervous about how he was going to do in basically like in a new school. And he can be really shy and things like that. But I've seen him also really be really engaging with other children and everything else. And so I felt like that was a good time to just trust your gut and say, I know he's going to, I'm not worried that he's going to come home crying kind of thing. I know he's going to have a great first day. And sure enough, put him into a new school and there was no issues. There was great first day.
Yeah, exactly. Wow.
Let's not forget our quote of the day.
Do you have a quote that you live by?
It's a funny quote, but I can't even explain it to you. It's something my mom used to say when I was little, which is she would hold like a spoon with her, just like in the most uncomfortable way possible and say like, you could eat this way, but why would you? And it was just sort of her way of saying like, you're making this far more complicated than it needs to be. I kind of think about that a lot because I think it's actually really easy to overcomplicate things. Often you have to just step back and be, first principles or think about what it was you were trying to do in the beginning before you got all wrapped up in the emotions of it or whatever else. And it turns out the answers are often much simpler than they appear at the beginning.
Absolutely.
It's now time for Mom Haul, when we share products we love.
And now on to Mom Haul. So this is the segment of the show where we talk about products that we're loving. And is there, a product that you feel like, okay, this changed my life?
A folding bathtub. When the babies are little.
Pudge. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was just this white bathtub that was, about the size of a sink. But then when you took it out of your bathtub, it didn't take up your whole bathroom. Like you could just fold it flat and slide it under something so that it wasn't in the way. And it was just this silly thing that finally made bath time work. Because everyone has this blue bathtub that, baby bathtub goes in their tub, but it's enormous and it just takes up so much space. So for me, that was one of those little things that when we found that on the internet somewhere, I was just so happy about it. I felt like it, gave us our bathroom back.
Yeah, totally. I know exactly what you're talking about. I use them for my twins and the third. PUJ is the name of the brand, and it's great. And it's foam, so super soft, especially for the newborn. And you can actually like fold it into your sink, so when they're really tiny, you're not just like hoping that they don't slip inside a small bathroom sink.
I actually just looked it up. The one we had was called the Stokey Flexi Bathtub.
Ooh,
it even has a little infant seat in it. And it's white with these gray stripes on it and kind of folds flat. And it has a little drain at the bottom, so you don't even have to lift it up to drain it out.
Oh, wow. This one I do not know about. That's great. Okay. So this is for the older kids, for the toddlers.
Yeah, it has an infant seat in it, actually. It comes with a little infant seat, but it goes all the way up till when they're toddlers, yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm all about space saving. In fact, I'm doing a product on that too. And it's the ACO folding stool. And we have tons all around the house because, now our kids, my toddlers are potty training and, being able to wash hands and everything afterwards. They can easily take out the stool themselves and put it down and then fold it up and stow it away. And
Right.
I'm all about that. I can't have little stools like cluttering my home.
Absolutely. No, these folding stools are also really clutch until they can finally reach the sink.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Great. Okay. Any last words to share with our listeners?
I think food has always been such a big part of every culture. And one of the things that's hardest for me as a parent is to have that taken away. You know, the birthday cake, for example, was the most central piece of the birthday. And that doesn't mean you should overstress about food allergies, but I hope that through through the 15-step plan and through early introduction, we can get back to a place where no one's worried about food anymore. We don't have to ask everyone what their allergies are. And we can go back to it being a central point of our cultures and just enjoy it again. And that's, I guess it's not really words of wisdom for families, but that is, I suppose, at least my hope and dream for this.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, for parents who don't have kids with allergies, for us to be more mindful, I have a very dear friend who has a child who has allergies, and she's allergic to milk and nuts and eggs. And the poor thing is so restricted in her diet, and so if she's coming to my kid's birthday party or going to a restaurant, my friend has to take all this food along for her, and, has to basically ask a few times over, is this kid friendly for my kid? And I feel for her because that's one more thing that she has to think about during the day for all her, the 3 meals and snacks that her little one's eating. And it's tough, and so I think for the parents where you're like, oh, this doesn't apply to me, just be more mindful about your friends who are dealing with this. And, I think it's great that you've launched a product that's here to eliminate these allergies in kids altogether. And we will get there. I think the fact that you're spreading this gospel and making parents more aware is so important. And, I think it's really great what you're doing. And where can my listeners and viewers find you?
So our products are, of course, available on the website, lilmixins.com. And like everybody, we're currently available on Amazon. And hopefully in the next year or so, we will be in retailer near you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the goal. And we can also follow you on social media too.
All of our handles, Lil Mixins was not taken. So that's our handle on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and anything else.
Woohoo! That's great. And very, very catchy name for a product. I love it. Meenal, thank you so much for being on That's Total Mom Sense. This was very enlightening, and, excited for your launch and all that's to come with the brand.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It's always fun to talk to new audiences about this.
I hope Meenal's story has triggered you to take childhood allergies into your own hands and work on early prevention. As an offer to all of my loyal listeners, she's extending an exclusive promo for Lil Mixins for 15% off your first order. Use promo code MOMSENSE15, and that's all lowercase. Log on to Lil Mixins, spelled LILMIXINS.com to purchase. Thanks again for listening and leaving me reviews and emails. I read and acknowledge every single one. Follow me on Instagram at KanikaXOXO and write to me at thatstotalmomsense@gmail.com. And remember, always trust your mom sense. Stay strong, super mamas. Bye.
That's Total Mom Sense.